When we're not in this little Instagram box, we are usually recording our groundbreaking podcast, which is Mothers of Invention, and it's feminist solutions to the climate crisis. I'm Maeve Higgins. I am a comedian and I'm a writer, and these days I'm just a layabout.
And I'm Mary Robinson. I was elected the first women president in Ireland, and then I was appointed UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. But these days, I'm chair of a wonderful group of elders. We're protecting elders at the moment because they're vulnerable, but the elders that I'm chair of are not vulnerable at all. We're very active, and we've learned new tricks on Zoom and everything else. We were brought together by Nelson Mandela, and we work on peace and human rights.
And then I series produce the podcasts.
Hi, Kamali. I know you're our series producer, but Kamali, you know that we're a podcast, and you told me I had to wear makeup for this just because we're doing a Zoom video.
Well, I'm very used to putting on a jacket and makeup, Maeve, because I have important Zoom meetings and I have to be right from the waist up because climate justice can't wait, you understand.
So the work we do on Mothers of Invention is grounded in the reality that as some of the most marginalized people in every society, Black, brown and Indigenous women and girls are existing at the front lines of the climate crisis. For them, the climate crisis isn't something that will happen in the future. It's already sewn into their generational past too. And so as long-time fighters and survivors of climate change, it's those same women and girls who are already equipped with the most holistic solutions. And that's why we humbly lean in and listen closely and quietly to what they have to say. And if we're really listening and keep listening, that moment will mark a journey that starts to decolonize our point of view. And that good work will put everybody on a path to climate, economic and racial justice for all. So Fatima Ibrahim is not only a climate activist and social justice campaigner. At only 26 years old, she is the co-executive director of the Green New Deal UK. And in 2019, we saw the Green New Deal gain massive traction in the US thanks to an extraordinary youth climate group called the Sunrise Movement. And of course, US Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But back in the UK, Fatima has been campaigning and building solidarity with international movements since she was a teenager. And that includes years organising with the UK Youth Climate Coalition and acting as a lead organiser of the People's Climate March. And so with all that goodness in mind, Mary, Maeve and Stella, please welcome to the most high quality Zoom hang of your lockdown, co-executive director of the Green New Deal UK, Fatima Ibrahim.
Hey,
Fatima!
And we're so delighted to be here to host Mothers of Invention. So welcome to this special episode on Television.
This is so nice. Thank you, everyone, for letting me join your highly intellectual power group.
We've been watching all the amazing things that you've been doing.
Yeah.
So thank you for having us. It's huge.
Well, it's a mutual love fest. Let's just leave it at that, shall we?
You know, we do interview extraordinary, mostly women. We've had 2 good men so far. We probably will have a few more. Mostly women from all over the world on how they're finding their ways to put an end to and address, you know, in a very forward-looking way, the climate crisis.
Yeah.
With only 10 years to go before there are irreversible effects on the climate, there's so much to do, and we need this advice, we need this guidance.
Absolutely. And the women that we speak to, they are getting it done.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to see you, Stella. I really admire your long work actively on sustainability because you know you've really done so much.
And so, Mary, do you want to tell Stella a little bit about where you came from and your way into climate justice?
Well, I always admit that I actually came quite late. I, you know, didn't make any speech as President of Ireland about climate change. When I served in the UN, there was another part of the UN dealing with it. I was in a silo. And then it was when I was working on the rights that really matter if you don't have them, rights to food and water, health, education, women, peace and security issues in African countries with a small organization called Realizing Rights, that I came to realize something that we didn't understand in the richer parts of the world, that it was already affecting the poorest countries and the poorest communities disproportionately, and that they were really suffering. So I must say, you know, I feel very humble when I, you know, meet people like you, Stella, that actually were much earlier, I think, to realize the importance of sustainability in your world.
It's not anyone's fault for not really realizing the connection between human rights and, you know, the planet's rights, if you like. I think I grew up on an organic farm. I was very privileged and very lucky to have parents that really came at life with that point of view, where sort of our fellow creatures seem to have, you know, an importance, I guess, and to connect the dots. I don't think it's, you know, you haven't come late. Thank God you've come. And I mean, human rights were as important to us at Stella McCartney as, you know, as Mother Earth's rights. It's critical. I mean, Christ, if you can't, you know, if you can't even respect fellow humans, how are you supposed to respect fellow animals and the earth? It's got to be a circular and heartfelt, you know, feeling. I think education is a huge part of it, but taking care of the people that we work with all along our community at Stella is critical. You have to make sure that you do your very, very best every step along the way to look after people with and have equality. Like for me, the main thing that I think we, you know, I'm fighting for equality in a sense for all.
And what we've known now with COVID-19 is that literally it is exacerbating all of the inequalities, the racial inequality, the gender inequality, the inequality towards minorities, towards people with disabilities, towards indigenous, towards those in lockdown with abusive partners.
It just heightens it all, doesn't it? It exaggerates all of our fears.
That I think ought to be, and will I hope be, a strong incentive to greater equality, including greater gender equality. And actually, we can note the women who are leading countries. I think it's worth remembering. Women are doing well out of this as leaders of their country. You know, Angela Merkel in Germany, prime ministers of Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, and Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, the president of Taiwan. They took tough decisions. They believed in the science, and they're leading their people in a way that people trust. They're kind of talking to them, you know, making sure that they understand what's happening and talking. And I hope that as we come out, we will really tackle this inequality issue, including the gender inequality.
Well, you know, I'm sure like we talk a lot about the Green New Deal here on Mothers of Invention, and it's hugely important to the future of the US where I live. But so like for folks that mightn't know about it, can you give us a read on it?
Yeah, the Green New Deal, as you say, has been gaining recent profile in the US, but around the world. And it really finds its roots in the New Deal, which was in the 1930s. President Franklin D. Roosevelt found himself at a crossroads where the US was going through an economic depression, the Great Depression, and then also an ecological crisis of the Dust Bowl, and had to figure out how to solve these two issues. And what he did is carry out a series of reforms that put democracy back in the driving seat of the economy and brought banks under control, invested in the environment, created millions of new jobs that put people back to work, there was huge unemployment, put people back into work in rehabilitating the environment, and was able to deal with the massive economic crash that had left lots of people unemployed while also fixing the environmental crisis. And what the Green New Deal is asking and demanding is that democracy is put back in the driving seat, and that collectively we're able to reshape our economy. So it's putting us first and making sure that we're not, you know, going straight into another crisis after this, which is the climate crisis.
We need not just a Green New Deal, we also need the focus on biodiversity and nature, marry the Green New Deal of green new jobs with the biodiversity of preserving at least 30% of land and oceans and working to regenerate all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit, what I've been late to, I think, is the biodiversity crisis. I very much came into campaigning around the climate from a human perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I cared about human rights. I was concerned about human rights. I saw that climate was the biggest threat to human rights. And I've been slow on the sort of picking up all of the tipping points that we have that mirror the climate tipping points in biodiversity. And I have friends of mine who are working on a New Deal for Nature. What does a New Deal for Nature look like? How do we, a big part of that, like I've been saying, again, it's this power thing of like giving communities better ownership of managing their lands, understanding what impact they're having on the natural world as we transition, because there are a lot of things that are touted as climate solutions that still require a huge amount of extractivism, that is still a massive threat to our oceans and the natural world.
Can I ask a question, Stella? You don't just take into account the environment, you also take climate into consideration with your designs. How do you do this in your business operations? Because you have very considerable business at this stage.
Yeah, it's changed dramatically over the years. The company will be 20 years next year. And from day one, it was always animal rights, really, for me. I grew up as a vegetarian and having just a love of animals and a respect for them. And I couldn't be hypocritical and go into the fashion industry and go, I'll just make some leather bags and leather shoes, because predominantly that's what the industry is sort of built on financially. And so I was lucky enough, I guess, in my upbringing to not have to compromise, and it started to serve me well. People knew what they were getting if they took me on. I trained as a fashion designer, so fashion always had to come first. And the two had to marry, because I've always thought if I was making hemp handbags that looked crap, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I think you have to marry the two worlds together.
Imagine if I slowly picked up my handbag and it was just a really bad
Well, I've heard about your hemp handbag collection, and quite frankly, I think we need to have a chat.
I definitely would have associated your early days of your work life with, animal rights. And then I wonder how you kind of made the swing towards, what we call climate justice.
Yeah, there was a really pivotal moment where there was a gentleman who got the Nobel Peace Prize, and he made a connection between animal agriculture and climate change. And then it all just fell into place. So then it became, okay, what glues are we using? What fabrics are we using? What about the biodynamic farming? It all starts at source. Over 60% of what we do that's positive for the climate is in our sourcing and from A to Z. How do we look at recycling? How do we use technology, our environmental profit and loss that we invest in heavily, just measuring the business, measuring the harm that we do as opposed to the good that we do, and just having really hard targets.
I'm interested in your environmental profit and loss concept, because this is meaning you're accountable.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, we measure, every year we invest as a company into measuring our environmental profit and loss. So we look at the negatives. We track all of our shipping, we track all of our manufacturing, we track all of our everything, every single element of what we do, and we measure it against, the environmental impact.
If you can't measure it, then you can't really understand what's happening. So I really like what you're doing.
I think it does. It puts numbers to it for business. It's very, you can see on a piece of paper what you're doing as a company.
Yeah.
It would be amazing if all brands had to do this. This is where we need policy change, as you know, Mary, more than anyone. I'm a massive fan of yours, by the way. I really am a massive admirer of yours. I'm so honoured to be talking.
Well, this is the mutual something society.
But I do think, it's critical. And I think that, every single second a truckload of fast fashion is either buried or, burnt. The most fascinating thing, and this is where we have to have hope, and we have to find solutions. And this is where technology comes in. That's over $500 billion worth of lost economics. So people wear stuff a maximum of 3 times in fast fashion before they chuck it away. Sometimes it has the label on already. Now that is an opportunity for business. And so we work with an amazing company called Avenue, and we just did a collaboration with them for Adidas. And we made these hoodies that were completely circular, completely upcycled. They took all waste, old garments in cotton and just regenerated it. And we made a completely new piece of fashion out of them. But we're limited to 50 pieces. Like, this is where it's fascinating, and that the technology is what hopefully can really help save us, and people's mindsets, obviously, just shifting.
But can I ask you a different question, Stella? How do you think the way that people are locked down in their homes with their families, using less. But do you think they will go back as much to the throwaway society?
It's hard to know what will happen when people come back. I hope that people will invest more in something good and have it for longer. I believe very much in timeless design. I only used to wear vintage clothes when I was young. I only used to have secondhand stuff. I mean, I think that there's a great move towards renting and like communities of resale and, you know, vintage and charity shops. Like that is something I feel very passionate about.
Timali, our producer, I mean, I don't think you've bought anything new in at least a year.
No, I've spent no more than probably around $2,000 on new clothing since I was 14, and I just turned 40 a few weeks ago.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's amazing. The reason I do what I do at this stage in my life and in my career is I believe I have to set an example. There has to be somebody that is showing you can do stuff differently. And in order to make people pay attention, sadly, you have to have a viable business model to kind of sit alongside it. So I feel very passionately that until I can get knocked out of the room, then, you know, I need to be here to have this conversation and kind of ruffle some feathers.
That's good. That's great.
Yeah, and I might ask, like, when our whole season 3 of Mothers of Invention is going to be about regenerative futures and also self-care for people who are doing the work. So what do you, like, if people haven't really caught up with you yet, like, how do you kind of cope and push on with your mission? And when you do need to learn and change, where do you go looking for answers?
I think it's just about connecting all the dots. I think, you know, if you want to learn, there's a lot to learn, and there's great places to go and get information. I think for me, I'm trying to really focus right now on how I explain and let people understand what I do, and, you know, why it matters and what the process is. I think it's really interesting. I'm fascinated by the stuff that I learn every day in the fashion industry. And technology for me is something that I have hope for. I have hope that they will find new ways and you know, it will be an assistance to what I need. The great thing is this is a conversation we can have now. And I grew up with this. I feel like all of a sudden in the last few years, I've been allowed to have this conversation and not be embarrassed and not be ridiculed or made fun of, or, you know, or found myself having to kind of justify what, you know, what I'm trying to do and what I believe in.
That's great that you can see changes even in your lifetime, and you're only 22.
Exactly, but I'm 23 tomorrow, so I'm really excited that you've all sent the presents. It's okay, what you can just donate to a charity in my name. It's fine.
Oh, thank you.
Buy me a tree.
Stella, you're so well known and famous. I think people kind of know how to follow you, but tell us, how can you look for more support? Because that's what we try to do on this Mothers of Invention. It's to really be helpful.
Well, you can go to I've never said this before, it sounds ridiculous. You can go to www.stellamccartney.com. We have, you know, a clear area that tells you everything that we're doing. It gives a really clear timeline as well, because I thought that was really important. For me, it's factual. You know, I have a timeline where we started the company in 2001, and it tells you what we did. Obviously, we didn't, you know, we never used any animal products, no fur, no animal glues. And it also sets out why that's good and what the conventional harm is, you know, that comes of a conventional leather, animal glues, etc. And it trickles all the way down through to our viscose, to our collaborations with many organizations. That's on there, so you can find out other great people doing great things, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and it talks about many things that we collaborate with, people that we admire and that we feel are the future. So yeah, you can go there, and there's a lot on there, and you can also just see that you can do it and you can enjoy it at the same time. I think that's what's so important from all of this conversation. Let's make this enjoyable. Let's find the balance so that we're not, you know, sort of ramming something down people's throats that maybe they feel completely threatened by. I think so much of this is just sort of saying, look, this is an alternative. You can start by tiny little things and it will have a great impact. And we're in this together.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Stella, and thanks, Fatima, and so good to see you, Mary. I certainly feel better when I think that I'm taking action, however small. Thanks for watching, everyone. We are actually launching season 3 of Mothers of Invention next month. So you've got plenty of time to binge on seasons 1 and 2 before that. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the usual podcast platforms. But right now, follow Mothers Invent on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, which is my drug of choice, to learn more from the amazing feminist climate justice warriors all over the world.
Keep up the great work, ladies. I'm very, very honoured.